Hello.
Hey, hey. We're here back again, and hope you all had a wonderful holiday season. Last episode, we celebrated the Appalachian Christmas a little early. So to start the new year, we're going to talk about our lonely books on the shelves, or as Sam likes to call them, shelf warmers. With so many options on the shelves, it's easier for our older titles to kind of sit on the shelves for quite some time. So we kind of wanted to talk about a few that we chose and why we chose them. So,
First housekeeping. First, Happy New Year's to everybody listening. We're technically time travelers because we're filming this in December. I was thinking about it this morning about getting those like glasses and little noisemakers and stuff, but
special.
I didn't think about it until today and had to come to work. But anyway, Happy New Year's. We did skip December's episode, so that's fine. It's just if you guys are looking for it, it's not there. Anyway, so closures. It's really a quiet month for January when it comes to like events because we're just gearing up for other stuff coming up the year. It's kind of our breather of past Christmas and everything like that. We've had so many programs, but
we sort of go with the school schedule, and schools were just kind of getting back into session. So
yeah. So anyway, all the branches are going to be closed on January 15th, which is a Monday for Martin Luther King Day. So that's the only closure we've got. We've also got a Fine Wave drive going on in January. It's going to be treats for the after-school program. So like pre-packaged things like crackers and chips and cookies and things that they can just give out afterwards. And it's got to be pre-packaged for safety and health concerns.
And typically we give away snacks during each of our programs. So in the makerspace, in the children's center, and also the teen center.
So every day after school, 3:30, kids get a snack. So growing kids, I was hungry coming home from school, partly because I didn't like the lunch, but also you're growing kids, so they're always hungry.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and also at KFL we kind of wanted to highlight Saturday, February 3rd is our Love Your Closet clothing swap, which is a mouthful, but that is a popular event every year. We do it twice a year, one for adults and one for children. So the one at the start of the year, February 3rd, is going to be our adult clothing swap. So we're looking for gently used, sort of smell-free clothes. If they can come in on hangers, we would appreciate that, but if not, that's okay. Just sort of having some sort of organization to it, I think, does help the process because we get so many, and there's just a select few people that are sort of going through. And but yeah, I think it's going to be a really great event. Everybody always really loves it. Do you want to kind of talk about the token system?
Yeah. So for about usually a week before, they'll announce the date's closer, but it's usually always a week before the event. People can start bringing in their clothes. They'll bring it down to the circulation desk, and then probably poor Delaney and Linda will be counting the clothes in the back, and you'll get a paper token for every piece of clothing we can accept, and then they'll give it to you. And then on the day of Saturday, there's a first few hours are just for token shoppers, and then so they'll get first come first serve, and then after that, it's a free for all. Everybody can come in and get what they want. And you don't if you bring in clothes and get tokens and you don't want them, you can leave them, and people we can give them to people who need them to be able to shop.
And you don't you can bring clothes, you don't have to shop. So that's absolutely an option. We appreciate every article of clothing that we get because it really does help our community. So
it's like it's a love yourself, but also it's good for New Year's too because you're cleaning up. They love to do their New Year's.
Definitely, yeah. So there's spring cleaning but early.
Yeah. So we're gonna help you with your New Year resolutions and also just loving yourself and helping your community at the same time. Ongoing programs, we've mentioned these before. Show Us Your Cousin Grandma is still running, so you can come in and bring a picture and write a small blurb, and we'll copy it to the archives here, so we have a record of her. Because a lot of women, especially the past, didn't get noticed and things like that. There's gaps in the historical record about just everyday women. So
and we're not interested in keeping the actual physical picture or anything.
Yeah, you can keep that and just get a blurb. And she doesn't necessarily have to be from the South either. We've got a bunch of transplants who have grandmas from all over. So
yeah, absolutely.
We've got the Kodak Veteran Tile Fundraiser, which is where they'll there's some nice pavers and they'll engrave information. You can get those applications at all of the branches. I think it's $100 per paver.
Yes, and the whole vision is that these pavers are going to sort of lead to the gazebo, right?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be around a tree?
Really,
I think that it's supposed to be in this beautiful,
it's an a nice outdoor patio
area
space.
Outside of our new Kodak building, which is very exciting. So,
and then we've still got the Duck It All fundraiser going on for Kodak. We're running out of ducks downstairs, so they're $5 per duck. You don't have to get them just for you. So a lot of people are getting them for their grandchildren and stuff like that. So it's good for a good cause. And then, not to be confused with the Kodak veteran tile, we've got the KFL veterans tile, which goes up on our decorative tile wall in our lobby. It's already created and made. We just got to finish paying off before we can stick it on the wall there. But and that's any amount of money you want to donate to that. So.
So I guess we can segue right into the books that we chose. I'll go ahead and start. I chose this book, A Christmas Guest, and it's short. It's not very long, more like a novella. But I sort of had been, I work in reference, so I had been shelving, and I shelved quite a few of Anne Perry's stories. So she's quite a prolific author, but also still very popular, even though some of her books are a little older. She recently passed away, so I think that she did have one final book released in 2023. It might have been late 2022. But in any case, I chose this one, checked the status of it, and it hadn't been checked out in about 5 years. I know it is a Christmas story, and we are in January now, but I feel like it's, I don't know, I just like Christmas anytime. So.
Well, you would have read it before, since we're filming.
That's true.
So
That's true.
So
okay.
you were reading
so I guess it was appropriate.
time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I get confused. So, but anyway, so it's about this. So a lot of her books, her genre is historical murder mysteries and detective fiction. I'm not as into detective fiction. I do like a good historical murder mystery. I thought this one was going to be less murder mystery and more like Bridgerton. So I guess that kind of took me by surprise. I just kind of picked it up and decided I was going to read it. But this one in particular is about a grandmother who is sort of abandoned for the holidays while her grandchildren go to Paris, which is very exciting. All of her books are sort of, I don't know what word to use. I keep wanting to use like regal, upper class sort of settings that I guess remind me and like lend itself to Bridgerton. And so this grandmother has to stay with this family called the Fieldings, and she thinks they're just kind of eccentric and weird and not really her vibe. So, but anyway, there is a murder that occurs, and the murder occurs, and she has to sort of get to the bottom of it.
Like Christmas?
Yes, I know.
How rude.
I never expected, right? A Christmas murder mystery. But yeah, so it took me by surprise. A very cute short read. I liked it, and when I was sort of looking into like the backstory of the author, which I kind of like to do, and I thought it might be interesting to know for the podcast, is she was actually convicted of a murder when she was 15 years old in New Zealand, and spent a lot of time in jail, and sort of re-established herself under a different name, which Anne Perry is her like new name. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. You don't really suspect that.
Who did she murder?
She murdered her friend's mother, and they like did it collaboratively. And what's interesting, and she was, like I said, 15 at the time. I don't know if I mentioned that, but yeah, she was 15.
Did they try her as an adult?
That I don't know, but she was released. I have the date in 1959, and there is actually a movie that was made after the story, and it's called Heavenly Creatures.
Okay.
And Kate Winslet plays her. So
yeah,
I thought that was kind of interesting. But she, like I said, she moved to Scotland, sort of reinvented writing, and then she actually later moved to the United States. So she passed away in Los Angeles, which I thought was interesting. She's had quite the
interesting life.
unique,
like reinventing yourself from a teenage murderer.
Yeah, and not only that, but also to write about murder, like
Yeah, well, she knows. She's like,
she is the, absolutely.
like, do you think half these people, do you think, like, Agatha Christie murdered all these people? Probably not.
I would hope not. So I just thought that was, like, a unique, I definitely didn't expect it when I picked up this story, so.
I should start, like, doing background checks on my authors.
Yeah, it's really funny, just to find out where they grew up, because she, like I said, is from New Zealand, so
and
also.
They moved to Scotland and into the United States.
Yeah, so quite, traveled, so.
My book is by Ursula K. Le Guin. I didn't really look into her past. I'm pretty sure she's passed away because she was writing in the 60s, so she would have been an adult in the 60s, so she's either very, very old or passed away. She's sort of a science fiction pioneer for women. I know, like, briefly of her. One of my friends was reading a lot of her stuff, and it's actually funny. My friend has read a whole bunch, like The Lathe of Heaven and a couple other ones, but she has The Left Hand of Darkness, and it's just perpetually checked out on Libby because she wants to read it, but she's never in the mood to read it.
Oh, no.
So every few weeks we'll get the, hey, Left Hand of Darkness, and we'll do it. And so she's at like 14%. So I was like, hey, guess what I'm reading? Because I was really excited to see this on the, we pulled a circulation report, and I was really excited to see this. There was a couple other ones too. I think there was one I suggested to Alexis, the dinner, which is like, again, an upper scale family dealing with a murder.
And to be fair, it seemed really scary, so I was like not quite feeling that.
I think it has a movie. I think that's how I heard about it.
Okay.
On TikTok or something. It had like a movie, and that's why I put it on my radar. But and I was like waffling between the two, but we ultimately decided on this one. I had Lana help me pick. But anyway, so yeah, she's like a science fiction pioneer. She's got the Earth-Sea Cycle is probably her biggest series, and then she's got this called the Hain, I think, or Haith series. I forgot the name off the top of my head. And that one, it doesn't necessarily have to be like read all together. It's just the idea is like there's this. I kind of compared to Star Trek a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've got the Federation, but you've got like this group that's kind of making these connections with all these planets to be this like one bigger group, and they just like kind of. It's not necessarily like there is trade, I guess, but it's not necessarily. It's like a cultural exchange and stuff. It's not like they're making a big army or anything. But they'll send what they call envoys out to these planets, and each book I think circles around an envoy on this planet. This one, I want to say it's probably one of her most well-known books, but don't quote me on that. It's just I'd heard of it before I read it.
Yeah, she's definitely a familiar author to me, but I have not.
But it's the envoy on this one. His name is Jinli I, like AI, and he is the envoy sent from Earth. And the thing is, it's sort of like reading a high fantasy novel because there's a lot of words that are dropped in here that you just have to figure out what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so he lands on this planet called Winter, which is like it's just super cold all the time. And these humans, there's this whole like overarching, and you don't get a whole bunch of it. You get like pieces of probably this bigger narrative where they're like humans or this human species.
That's right. They are humans.
And they populated other places, including Earth, and then they've populated like Terra. Or in Winter, so there's like they're connected, they're bipedal, they're human, but there's sometimes little differences. Like in this one, there's not male or female; they're both.
Interesting.
And then once I could never get the time figured out on this one, but like once a cycle, they'll go into what they call kimmering, and you'll and someone else will go on kimmering, and then you'll like if you find each other desirable, you get together, and one of you would turn into a man, and one of you would turn into a female, reproductive purpose-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd get together, and if you were pregnant, the woman would stay a woman, and the man would go back to being sexless. And so it was interesting because you can have like multiple, I guess, partners, but they did vow kimmering to people to like marriage, and so you could have a child, but then there was also a child of your flesh, which was more wanted, I suppose, or like they have a king, and the king was going to have a kid, and that kid was going to be his heir because it was the child of his flesh,
mm-hmm.
not someone he just sired. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
But the thing I got really frustrated with is, I guess maybe because it was written in the 60s, they didn't use they, which I'm not saying like they have to, but they kept saying he. They were all he's basically the whole time.
Yeah.
And so I kept falling into the dynamic of he versus she. And same with Jin, but I guess sort of, she could have done it on purpose because the envoy, Jinli, kept doing that too. And he would look at one and try to find more male or more female. And he kind of looked down on women because he'd be like, oh, that so-and-so was acting effeminate. I didn't like that. So I didn't find the main character super likable. I did like some of the people he came across. And at the same time, you get this feeling of, she did a good job of, like, you are the human going into this world you don't understand, so you kind of relate to him, like, you're like, what's going on?
Okay,
But at the same time, I feel like she could have described things better. They had this thing called shift something, and it's basically like a pride aspect, but she doesn't explain it as such, and it's like the envoy doesn't really understand it, but he keeps getting tangled up into it, and like, so one of the main characters was trying to give him advice. It's like, you don't want to actually give good advice, you want to talk around the subject, and it's you kind of get it, you kind of don't. So there's a lot of misunderstandings between some of the main characters because the human doesn't, well, I keep saying the human, they're both human, but the Jinli doesn't understand it. And then there's like these two religions too, and they're really interesting. You don't get a whole bunch on them, but there's like one where they like sort of look into the future, but you kind of learn the ideas, like the question you ask isn't the important, like the questions that you can ask are the important ones, kind of things, and the answers you get aren't the ones you need. And so it's this interesting idea of like a philosophy of sort of ignorance, but not as a bad thing, is sort of just like, living your life. If you don't ask these questions, you can't ruin your life by it. Like if you went and asked, when will I die, and they kind of give you a vague answer, then you're going to dread the whole time of when you're going to die.
Yeah.
And then you're going to end up causing a death, or so there's little caveats, stories between every chapter that explain more of like the culture and stories and stuff, and it was very fascinating. And then there was another one, sort of makes me think of Christianity, because they had this prophet sort of main character, and what had happened was he somehow could see into the past and the future, everything all at once, all the time, until he died. And then so they started like basing off their calendar year off of this man's birth. So every year is year zero, and the time's really confusing. I could not get a grasp on that, but they had very interesting philosophy. So for that one, like the present is always the present, past, the future, everything. It's just you're in the present moment, but they're like kind of at odds, those two religions. Not like they're not having wars. This planet they live on doesn't have wars at all. They might have skirmishes and like occasional murders, but like as far as like war, no. And then you've got one country that's kind of like lackadaisical, sort of, and then the other one's sort of like almost think communist Russia. You have to have all these papers and things. But then they both have their good points and their bad points, and they both go around that pride aspect, and like you get a lot of politics in this book, which was really interesting. It's just I felt like I didn't understand enough, and partly I'm sure that's to get into it, but partly I'm like, am I too dumb for this book?
No, I doubt that. I wonder if it would help for like a second read.
Maybe at this point, knowing what I know now, but at the same time, it wasn't my favorite. Like there was aspects I really enjoyed, but there was aspects I found frustrating with it. Like I wish it would have used a they, because I kept getting stuck in that dichotomy, and which could have been part of the purpose. And she didn't, like I said, write very highly of women, but it could have been just this character's point of view. So.
Yeah.
And they got to the end sort of where it only has one envoy, one person comes to the planet, because it's not supposed to be a threat. Like, it's like, two is an invasion, one's just a curiosity.
Okay.
But then there's also the idea of maybe they only send one down because then that envoy's alone, so they have to learn and they have to communicate and they have to make friends, sort of thing. So that was cool. But later when the humans come down, he looks at them with the men and the women, and he's like, these aren't people anymore, because he's used to. So it was fascinating. They killed off a character I really liked at the very end. I was like, how dare you? But like I said, I think I was telling you, I was 4 out of 5 stars. I put it on a low 4. I wanted more out of it, but it had some really good aspects, like anthropological aspects and things. And I feel like I read somewhere maybe that was part of her background or something, like either her parents were, so she's the daughter of, I think, an anthropologist and an author. And she was born in 1929.
Wow.
And she went to college in Radcliffe and Columbia and married her husband in Paris in 1953. So, The Left Hand of Darkness was awarded both the Nebula and the Hugo Awards, which are really big sci-fi and fantasy awards, which awarded the 1975 Hugo and Nebula Awards to The Dispossessed. Ursula K. Le Guin became one of the first authors to win both awards twice for novels.
Oh, interesting.
So, she's, really kind of important in her field. I just personally didn't like this book. I will give her another try, probably not immediately. But yeah, that book.
Yeah, and I think that's important, to know when it was written. I feel like that establishes, I don't know, obviously it wasn't written now. If it was written now, I don't know that it would have the same impact.
It might, but she might have had to write it differently in some aspects. And then I think my criticisms are more of a modern criticism. But she's still amazing for touching on these things of gender and the other and things like that. It's just, it's in the 60s, whereas we're in 2024 now. We will be in 2024. Yeah. So, no, it was good, and I'm not gonna knock. She did some really good work. It just wasn't specifically something I loved.
Do you have a favorite of hers?
No, this is my first one.
Oh, okay.
My friend Caitlin really likes her, and we read very similar stuff.
Yeah.
But she can kind of get into deeper sci-fi occasionally, whereas I don't get as deep.
Yeah.
It's sort of like if felt like reading Tolkien occasionally, where especially when it was talking about some of they're on a glacier for 3 chapters and changing directions, and you've got these dates that don't really make sense. There's actually a glossary for the dates and the time in the back, and honestly, I didn't care enough. And this was one of the few books, because I'm not a map person. I love people. People are like, I love maps. I don't reference maps. I wish I had a map for this one.
Yeah, which I feel like I do like the fact that there's a map in all of Game of Thrones and that type of thing. I feel like not that I've completed those books, but in looking and seeing, I think that basic maps are good, sort of establishing, but I also feel kind of the same.
Yeah. So it was. I'd give it a try. Especially if you're really hard up on sci-fi, I would give it a try. But I was going to ask you, because I didn't write it down. Do you have any New Year's resolution reading goals, sort of thing? Since we're
why don't you go first?
Okay, so I give you time to think.
Yeah.
I was thinking of doing a low buy year. So not a no buy year. I'm not strong enough for that, but a low buy year, to where I would limit myself to either one book, buying one book a month, or reading 2 manga, which costs manga $10 or $12. So if you get 2, it's the price of one book. But doing something like that, and then also continuing to catch up on my books on my shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, in January, I will be seeing Wicked, so I have a couple of the books on my shelf, so I'm going to give the first one a read, and if I like it, I'll read the other ones, and if I don't like it, I'll take them to the friends.
Yeah, I read the first one, and I liked it.
So that's probably one of the ones that is sooner up on my to-read list.
Yeah, you'll have to read. Are you going to read it before or after?
I think I'm going to read it before, because I feel like it'll help, but I understand the musical's probably completely different. I read a little bit of Wicked in high school, and I know there was they go to college, I think, and there's a lot of sex sort of involved, which is not going to be.
Yeah, it was surprising to me. So in that respect, I definitely think it's different than the play.
Yeah, I don't know how much the narrative sort of follows. So I'll probably read it just to kind of have an idea of the characters, and also I can be like, well, this is different, and that's okay if it's different.
Yeah.
But when I saw Anastasia was pretty close to the movie. Interesting. So they had some extra stuff to it, but it was following. Yeah, they took out the bits with Rasputin and the bugs and things, but her journey was pretty. Instead of Rasputin as the villain, the villains were I can't remember if it's the red or the whites. Whoever was against the Ben, who killed the Romanovs? To come into power.
In the real history?
Yeah, in the real
the
history.
Bolsheviks.
Okay, yeah, so the Bolsheviks. Sorry, I had to take a moment to ask but yeah, so they were hiding from the Bolsheviks were coming up, and there was this one leader. But other than that, though, they took away the fantastical Rasputin undead thing and did it more. But it was good. It was I really liked it. So I've never watched Wicked, so I'm kind of excited. But that's, like I said, getting off topic. to get more books off my shelf read, which one of them happens to be Wicked, and I think I have some Bewitched too.
Mhm.
So someone had donated them. I was like, thanks.
Yeah, well, good. I think that just picking up more physical copies of books. I think I was talking to you earlier about how I really like audiobooks and listening in the car. I find it hard to carve out special times to sit down and read. So maybe that will be my goal for this upcoming year. So
Remember, just one more book that you read than you did last year.
exactly.
That brings us on to, I guess, the last topic of the day, which is next month's February's. We're going to be doing a Love Yourself Valentine's Day, so kind of aiming towards nonfiction, probably more towards the self-help area.
Yeah.
Not to, or maybe cookbooks, but I know we have a specific bonus one I think we're going to do with cookbooks as long as we get around to doing it.
Yeah.
Kind of dropped the ball on bonus ones, but we've been really busy.
Life.
Life's been really life lately. So, but yeah, Love Yourself. I've got a couple ideas picked out. If not to read, to then put on the display.
Yeah.
Because our display's very bare this month, but it's okay.
Well, we highlighted those two. So.
Yeah. We read those. And that's, I think, about it.
Okay. All right. Well, it was nice chatting with you, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.